Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag and drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rusties taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Z is over. It's time to sell our eyeballs to the Americans.
Maître, j'ai instruit cette affaire et je n'ai pas besoin de vos conseils. Ils ont appris que j'avais des révélations importantes à vous faire. Et en venant ici, une voiture a essayé de m'écraser.
All right, Andy, here we are. Z.
Z, as some say.
1969 political thriller. It's an assassination thriller that is between the leftist and the rightists and the military, the gendarmerie. And it is another in our series of foreign language Best Picture nominees.
It is. You're right. This is the second of the films that have been nominated that weren't English language that were nominated for Best Picture. From 1969, Costa-Gavras' film Z.
Thing that I learned, I've been pronouncing Costa-Gavras' name wrong all these years. Always thought it was Costa-Gavras. So, step one, the R is after the V.
Right. And did you, I always wondered about his name. I just never did any research into it, but I'm like, what an odd, Madonna type of name to have your name, but it's like a hyphenated name. And I was like, is it just his last name, but he happened to have a hyphenated last name? But no, in fact, it's his name is, let's see if I can work on my Greek here, Konstantinos Gavras. Konstantinos Gavras. And I guess, took the abbreviated short version, Costa-Gavras, for his filmmaking work.
All right, Andy. So this one is definitely, it's got a bit of different feel. It feels, it is definitely taking on a really interesting story and presenting it in an incredibly interesting way. When is the last time you saw a movie that opened with any resemblance to real people is intentional on screen?
Right? Never. I thought it was fascinating. And I'm sure I've seen some, I couldn't think of what they are, but I had not seen something that just felt so bold and just in your face, hey, yeah, this is all intentional. All of these references to people, it's all meant to be that way. And it taught me a new word that I feel like I've read before, but I feel like because of the fact that clef is in it, I think I've always associated it with a musical term. Finally learning that I've been wrong all these years. Romana Clay is actually the definition of it is, well, technically it's French for novel with a key, but it is generally a novel about real life events overlaid with just a facade of fiction. So it's fictitious names representing real people, which is what we have here. I'm glad to know the proper way to say that word and what it actually means.
Well, I'm thrilled to hear that you've learned something, and
once in a while,
by extension,
it does happen.
Are able to teach it. So this movie does tell a story, as if by puppet theater. It tells a story of sort of a plot to disrupt a liberal agenda. Right. And
yes.
And so this movie opens with a rally, a demonstration. They're planning a demonstration. I should say, actually, let me step back. The movie opens with a military and police briefing. And we're learning about virus or
mildew
disease spreading. Yeah, molds and mildews spreading in plants, and they use it as a way to introduce a colonel who stands up and starts teaching about the same way mildews spread in foliage. So do ideas spread like these sorts of diseases, and use it as a way to talk about stamping out the leftist agenda.
Which was actually something that, speaking to the Romana Clay nature of this story, is what the Greek politicians, the government, was actually using as ways to describe, all of these leftist ideologies of the time.
Fascinating. So now let's talk about that that introduces us to the world of this movie, and then we meet a lot of people, one after the other. But how are you feeling at this point as you embark on your journey with this movie?
The first time I watched this, which was not too long ago, I was hit by how fresh the film was, how direct Costa-Gavras made it with such intention and just momentum. It really was just, it felt like, modern filmmaking. It grabbed me right away, right with the credits, the way the music hits and the way that the credits kind of slam in and out, and just everything was just, I just thought there was such an energy to the film for a story that is all about a political assassination. Essentially, I felt like he found a way to grab attention right away and created this story that just, it was really a fascinating journey through watching how things played out over the course of this, the buildup to the, I guess we're calling it an assassination attempt, although I don't think it was, or murder, although I don't think it was intended necessarily to actually result in death. I'm a little not sure about if it was intended or not. Regardless, injury, certainly. And the way that it then kind of the story unfolds with the investigation and leading to that ending that I just think is just like, I mean, it hit me like something that is like so incredibly relevant still. And I was really kind of blindsided by this film because I'd always heard of it, but had no idea what power the film actually had. I found it to be an incredible watch and rewatch.
I think Costa-Gavras does an exceptional job of presenting this opening section. This is sort of act one of the rally, the preparations for the rally, the different factions that are operating on the streets and in these office buildings, and going through the preparations of finding a hall. Is there a hall that's big enough? And how do we portray the actual like figurehead, right? Because we hear, the doctor is coming. The doctor's coming. There is apparently a plot against the doctor's life, but who is the doctor and how will we know who the doctor is? And Yves Montand comes on scene as Z, as this sort of figurehead, and he's tall and handsome and puts his arm around everybody he sees, and he's just generally lovable. And so now we have this sense of the key players and the idealism and the ideologies at work here, right in the square on this street in front of this Union Workers Hall, and it all, to my mind, comes together beautifully, and it's all in a space that could otherwise be incredibly confusing. They're all wearing the same thing, right? Besides the military police, everybody else on the street they're wearing the same thing. They're just angry at each other, and yet I felt like I never lost sense of space. I never lost sense of character in terms of who was who and what they were ultimately trying to silence, and what and in reverse what they were ultimately trying to voice. I thought that was beautifully portrayed.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, it's kind of just an astounding piece of filmmaking, the way that he weaves this story with, like you said, so many players, and a lot of players with faces that aren't as recognizable, right? I mean, we have a few pretty well-known French actors in the film, but also there are just a lot of other faces that are, aren't as well-known. Mm-hmm. And so you're kind of relying on the fact that, okay, there's a bunch of these different deputies, there's a bunch of these different police, there's a bunch of people who are kind of the I guess we'll call them the troublemakers, the ones who the police use to kind of create these problems and everything, and the journalists and everybody's kind of coming in and out of their lives. And even when we meet a new character, it all of a sudden is like, okay, well, they were just talking like the witness partway through the film. We all of a sudden have this witness who says it was a murder. And then we cut, as soon as we learn, we cut to this guy we've never seen before, just kind of strolling down the street. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, he must be the witness. So, I mean, they make it pretty clear how it happens. And then he's just kind of strolling down the street. And of course, he gets hit on the head by somebody in a van who doesn't want him to make it to his statement. And it's just, I don't know, I just found the way that the construction worked to really paint kind of the tense political climate that was in Greece at the time. Although I think it's meant to be set in Greece. The film never really specifically says it's French actors. Costa-Gavras was Greek, but pretty much raised in France. And they filmed it in Algeria because they couldn't. I mean, Greece was never going to let them make a movie like this. But
Algeria looks pretty Mediterranean.
They picked it exactly for that, right? Yeah, because it had very much that look, and so. I think that it's the way that the story moves. It's just, I think it's just when you're setting up a political thriller like this with a lot of different opposing sides and a lot of, it's interesting, Rashomon-esque type of storytelling, I guess we could almost say, right? Where you see a few different things play out, like with the actual assassination from different points of view, and you're not necessarily seeing it like from the way that they saw it. Sometimes you're seeing the way that they're wanting it to be portrayed, as in they're lying. And I thought that was actually kind of really interesting, the way that everything kind of was built. It was just incredibly constructed.
That's a beautiful observation, and it reminded me of, even when you talk about modern filmmaking, I was shaken when we started having those perspective reports that would replay the flashbacks differently. I thought that was incredible, and lo and behold, we just talked about that in Knives Out, using the exact same visual trope. What a wonderful sort of honorific to this sort of historical treatment of the way we can talk about narrative and replaying stories. I thought that was great. I do want to highlight your conversation about Nick, the witness who gets hit over the head, and in particular, what I find is so strong about the way they introduce him as a character so late in the movie, that he walks out before we know anything about him. He walks out on the street. He's hit on the head and wakes up in the hospital. But after that, they introduce not just a little bit of his backstory, where did he come from, but more story about the initial narrative. The fact that he is also he makes coffins and varnishes coffins, and he overheard this and that from the delivery guy. Like, there's so much story introduced after we introduce this character more than halfway through the movie. And to do it in a way that doesn't end up feeling clumsy, I think was a real sort of testament to skill and confidence in being able to do this. He uses very similar sort of tropes on a very smaller scale when you look at how he cuts together Helene's sense of grief. Now, she's lost her husband. She finds out that her husband has ultimately been murdered and isn't going to make it out of the hospital. And the way he cuts together her memory of experience, like sense memory of experience, when someone touches her face and she flashes back and it feels like it's actually his hand on her face. And, as she's holding him, hugging him, these quick cuts back and forth between her real lived experience and her sense memory of him over the course of just a minute or two, I think was really elegant.
And I'm glad you brought that up as well, because I thought what was interesting with the way that was intercut was we also have a similar moment when we're with her husband, the deputy, Yves Montand, when he has a memory. This was when he first arrives at the place where they're going to have the meeting, and I can't remember exactly what it is that triggers it, but suddenly you have
wig.
This, yes,
the woman
wig,
who's
right.
like massaging the wig.
Right. He sees the wig.
It's a little weird, honestly.
And it flashes back for him to this woman that he had an affair with, who was wearing a wig, and his wife happened to walk in. And just a great way to just give us a sense of who these characters are. And you get that before you end up meeting Helene, and then you meet her, and you know that she's carrying that damage from their relationship. But then also we have now, like, the way that she's having these little memories of her husband and everything. It was beautifully constructed. And I love the way you get the moments with these characters that really paints their who they are. It gives us a real good sense of them and the depth of those particular moments. And I think that Costa-Gavras really used that effectively throughout, finding ways to bring these flashbacks in, like you said with Nick, where we get the flashbacks to when he overhears it. Same way when we hear the mystery figure that one of the guys' wife happened to be with at her place of work, and he had likewise had a similar situation where he had been talking to the guy and kind of heard the whole thing. And later when he's explaining it, we kind of have the similar way that the flashbacks play out. It's really sharp filmmaking. And I just think it works so well in context of the style of film that is being portrayed here.
Just while we're on the subject of Nick in particular, as played by Georges Jouret, who is great, the tone changes in the movie with his introduction a little bit. And maybe it's not over the entire film, because I still think, we're in the, in the space of Jean-Louis Trintignant, the prosecutor, I feel like it's still a really sober portrayal of the investigation and the pressures that he's under, trying to walk both sides of this particular issue. I I think Nick and his sister are a real distraction for me. His sister, played by Magali Noel, she comes in and she is completely over the top in her portrayal of concern and fear and grief. And it turns from, this is an interesting character that's going to illuminate something about this story, to whenever she's on screen, it becomes kind of a comical sort of vaudevillian or a lampoon of grief, of investigation, of all of this stuff. And not to take away from he's also kind of a grandstander, right? I mean, when the photojournalist comes in and he's taking pictures, he's like taking his shirt off and he's like smiling with the ice pack on his head. Like, all of these sort of things kind of make me crazy.
Well, but I think that it speaks to the nature of just people. And, we get the deputy. I mean, he's a great guy, but he's also having an affair. Here we have Nick, who wants to do the right thing. He wants to say, look, I heard all this information. It was murder. It wasn't actually an accident. But at the same time, he really just wants to get his picture in the paper, because this guy who he thinks is kind of this bum, who's this driver, he already has his picture in the paper. And now he's just like, what? I want to get mine. Right. And so I think that that's an interesting exploration we have here. But then I also think we're getting the other side. And that's why I think, and I agree, Nick's sister, may be seen as kind of an over-the-top, overpowering type of figure in the story. But I think it speaks to the nature of people not wanting to get it in their, not wanting to get involved in these sorts of situations, because it's like, this could really screw things up for us. We're just little people. We don't want to have our lives destroyed by involvement in this machine that is so much bigger than we are. We just want to play our little part and just kind of go through life. And that's that. And I think that that's a really interesting element that we see that really only comes through in Nick's sister, is the idea of not wanting to be involved. And I think it's equally relevant that there are people out there who are just like, I want to, I'm going to close my eyes to it and just going to keep moving through my life because I need things to work the way they are, because I'm one of the low end people. It's hard for me. It's hard for my husband to get licenses. We have to go to these people to get licenses for our shop. And I found it to be an actually really interesting element to the story.
Well, and I agree with you. I think I think that is an interesting element to the story. I think the performative criticism that I have is that she is an apt demonstration of the perils of 1960s women on film, which is, this is a one-note portrayal. Right. This is there is no sense of nuance. There's no sense of they don't give her the opportunity to have anywhere near the same impact on screen that we get from someone like, for example, the attorney who is chased down by the car. Right. I mean, he ultimately has not a huge part in the movie, but we get a lot more of him. We get an opportunity to see him in different spaces, right, in different sort of emotional spaces, and we don't get that from her, and that's frustrating a little bit to me, because I think you're right. Like, there is a great opportunity to have this experience with her of fear, of just trying to be a pedestrian in this chaos, and I don't think we have the opportunity to do that. I think her portrayal, the way she was directed, distracts from that element. And I would say the second act too, if we look at this as sort of for me, this was a Law and Order, or I've just binged Perry Mason. And so you have the act or the investigation, and then you have the courtroom scene, right? Well, we have the act, we have the rumble in the square, and then we have the investigation. And I think that I loved the entire first half of this movie. And when it turns over to the investigation, my goodness, it became a real sort of snooze for me, a difficult experience with highlights. I just did not enjoy my time until he injected it with some of these more sort of visual masterstrokes, these editorial choices that I think were really particularly strong. But overall, I feel like we got the same conversation with the same mustachioed colonels over and over and over again, and I was ready to be done with it.
Interesting. For me, I was mesmerized the whole time, the whole second act. I mean, really the whole film. And I just think a lot of it is just the complexities that the magistrate is going through as he tries to investigate this crime and finding, dead end after dead end as he keeps going down a road, and then, hearing, their alibi is confirmed, and the way that played over and over again throughout, I just found so interesting in every little step. And I just loved watching the way that Jean-Louis Trintignant, I don't know how you say Trintignant. How do you say that French name?
Trintignant.
Trintignant. Jean-Louis Trintignant. It's very
good.
French.
Yeah.
I love watching him throughout because the way that he observed, and then you could see in his eyes little glimmers when he started latching onto things. And I loved when he would catch lines that people would repeat, or those different elements.
What is the line? It's your favorite line. Lithe and something. Yeah,
lithe and fierce like a tiger. I just thought that was great.
Like you.
It's just like me.
That's going to be on your headstone.
That's all that will be on my headstone. It's great. But I loved the way that he latches onto things like the little communist thing that he latches onto with Vago, and finds these little things that he can kind of grab. And that's why I really enjoyed watching the second half, because I just found him and his investigation, the way that he started piecing this together. Because I mean, it is everybody lying, right? Except for people who are really kind of on the deputy's side and watching. But then even then, as we learn, he has to assume that there is a lot of lies coming from their side too, which I found really interesting, the way that he's trying to kind of piece everything together. And so as the story builds and we get to like that master stroke editing where we have just the kind of the final kind of round of everybody coming in, and he's kind of the last bit of people coming in, and then all the accusations of everybody going out. I just found the editing there just brilliant, the way that everybody, like, he's just totally disregarding the attorney general, and he's just accusing everybody of murder, and it just like I don't know. I just felt like the film just kept building and building. And for me, it worked incredibly well. I couldn't get over how smart it was.
Well, and I would agree with you. Like, the last 15 minutes of the film was fantastic, and those accusations, and I feel like you kind of sped by the secret meeting with the district attorney or the attorney general, right? Where he comes in and they take him into that incredibly sort of like that courtroom, right? Which is a space of great power, where it's his home turf, and he sets him in one of the sort of peripheral seats, and the attorney general stands in the middle and essentially gives him the offer he can't refuse, right? Like, you are meddling with the primal forces of nature, Mr. Beale, and I will not have it scene, right? I felt like that was fantastic and subversive. And some of the challenge I have with the second act is the fact that, when you have hitched your wagon to this particular horse, right? To telling a real story with fictitious names. And in this case, the story of the murder of Grigoris Lambrakis just, 6 years before. You have to do due diligence and put all the people that you're that sort of were in there in the real life scenario. You've got to find a way to shoehorn them in to demonstrate the level of corruption that they're dealing with, which is extraordinary. It's so extraordinary that you think, my God, it is beyond cinema. Like, if you were sitting down to write a screenplay, you would not have this many villains, right? It is too much. And so he's already sort of made that commitment. And I think that is, this just goes with the territory. For me, that space between entering into Trintignant's territory and watching him go through this, you pulled out the highlights of the things I really liked. Anytime the mustachioed colonels come in, I start to nod off. Getting me to that big climax, I'm totally with you. And I definitely want to hear your take on the way they end the movie. What a weirdly artful way to give us an epilogue.
I thought it was genius, just like everything else. It was just, it it was such a slap in the face, because you have this investigator who's like, you know what, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to not heed the advice from the attorney general. I'm going to move forward and accuse all of these people, police, military, government, whoever it is. I'm going to accuse them of murder, of involvement in this crime, and we're going to go down the row. And the way that it's done, I just found to be incredible, because First, you have the actual accusations where he's kind of letting them know you're accused of murder. And then he sends them out through the, quote, back doors to avoid the press, which eventually the press latches onto. And by the time the main general goes out, it's like all the press is out there waiting for him. Just fantastic. But then you cut to the reporter as he is giving you this update, basically, of everything that's happened. And it's like, oh, all of these witnesses, well, 7 of them are dead. This one died of a suicide. This one died in an accident. This one fell out of a window. And it's just
look, a mechanical failure.
Right.
There's a body like hanging over a combine.
Right. You see like the reporter talking about these witnesses. And then what I think is really smart is you're seeing kind of the actual photos of like what really happened to the real person in the story as we kind of go through this, and you just keep going. And then all of a sudden it's the investigator, because the new government comes in and now he's killed. And it's like everybody keeps having things happen to them. And then we cut to a new reporter who talks about the old reporter being accused of crimes for, I can't remember what, but it's just like now they're going literally after everybody in the film, and they're all found guilty or accidentally die before they can testify. Right. And then when the new reporter comes in to say all that, then it turns into this moment that, all I could think of was like, I think it was the teaser trailer, weird place to go to in my head, but the teaser trailer for Escape from LA, not a great film to compare to this. But what I loved about that trailer is it's like, it's listing this, this row of or list of things that are banned now. And it goes through things like, please, you're in the theater, please, no talking, no chewing gum, no chewing with your mouth open. And it keeps going. And it's all of a sudden, it's just like to the point of ridiculousness of things that are banned. And it's like, geez, this is crazy. And that's what happens at the end here when you just start going through all these authors that are banned, all these different artists that are banned, just everybody that's banned and banned. It's this huge list that goes across the screen, ending in the letter Z. The letter Z is banned because of the use of the reference to this person, Lambrakis, who in the whole He Lives movement by painting the Z around. I couldn't
help but think about Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Like, we apologize for the fault in the subtitles. Those responsible have been sacked.
Right.
Mind you, moose bites can be pretty nasty.
Right. Those responsible for sacking have been sacked. Right.
Exactly. That's the reporter twist at the end, which I thought was so funny unintentionally. Like, I get it. It was a great twist to have a new reporter's voice come in as the old reporter. It was for leaking or publishing official documents. That's why he went to prison. Yeah. That reporter. It was I thought that was a great way to end it, and deeply sad, right? That
absolutely.
As they start talking about I was gratified that one of the things on the list that you mentioned, I'd like to call out by name, which is new math. Oh goodness, if we could ban new math.
Oh, that's too funny.
Anyway.
Well, move to Greece in the 60s.
Yeah, right. right.
They've already done it.
All right, they got rid of it. Anybody else in the cast you want to call out by name? I think we've talked about Yves Montand. This is tall and graceful. He's a gazelle.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because I feel like his name is just such a name, but I was like, I think I know him more from some songs that he sang, because he was very popular as a singer and an actor. But I think the songs is what I knew him more from. Just a great personality here, and what a great person to play a politician. And for me, the best moment of him in the film is when he goes back out. He's been hit in the head by one of these troublemakers outside. He goes in, he does his speech, which is great. And just as a side note, all of this film felt so much like I was watching the United States 4 months ago, like after the killing of George Floyd and all of the riots and the protests, a lot of the kind of the peaceful protests, and then reports of who are these mysterious figures dropping crates of bricks off. I'm just like, wow, this all feels way too real watching this film.
Like is this a movie or a blueprint? Right? Like it was gross.
It really was, like all the way through the way that the accusations flew at the end. I'm like, I feel like I'm watching a movie that's taking place right now. It's nuts. It's crazy. But anyway, Yves Montand, my favorite moment was when he comes back out and he's going out to talk to the police officer who, he walks away. I was like, dang, dude. Cold. But then two, I guess I'll just call them insurgents, charge out to get him. And he just boldly stands there and walks up to them and is just like, what? Are you going to come? And then these guys run away. I'm like, God, that was great. What a great moment. Yeah. Before, of course, the truck comes in and hit him over the head and kill him. Also,
a truck lovingly called a kamikaze.
Yeah, right.
Right. So that was Iago and Vago.
Yes.
We've got to talk about Vago, Marcel Bouzoufi. He is also the center of what I think was some earned comedy in the movie that I quite liked, when he was actually going to assassinate Nick in the hospital, and he was put in the hospital and has a cast on. We see him because he tries to sneak in the door where Nick is being cared for. He sneaks in, but the photojournalist is there, and they see each other, and Nick runs, and he's running in a robe and his cast on his foot, runs down the hall with his club cane, gets back into his own bed, and the doctors are all standing there now, and he's like, huh? Oh no, doctors are here. I mean, but it was, which I thought was,
and
was
the doctor's
really funny.
So you're the one with the heart condition?
Yeah. No, it's my leg. This cast that has clearly just been put on. He's part of the Goon Squad, and he was also in I think it's Pierre Nicoli in The French Connection, and you might know him better from his role in The Cage aux Folles 2. So he's one of those really familiar faces.
A really interesting character. I loved that we had these two kind of, I don't know, it struck me that it's funny that the two assassins are Iago and Vago. It's just, I don't know, it just seems like such an assassin thing to have them named so similarly like that.
I know. But it's meet my cousins, Hunter and Killer.
Right, exactly. I was going more for this is my cousin Daryl, my other cousin Daryl.
Yeah, cousin Daryl, yeah.
But what I thought was interesting is that they pretty overtly portray him as this gay character, and I'm like, oh, that was it's never brought up other than just a couple small scenes, and it's never made anything of. And I'm like, it's really interesting to kind of give us those moments of this insight into this character that, I mean, otherwise it really doesn't matter one way or the other. But it just kind of surprised me that we have at least two little moments with him where it's oh, interesting.
You're referring to the pinball scene as one of them?
Well, one when he's talking to his reporter friend, and he asks him he's another one who just wants the glory of having his name in the paper, just like Nick, which is really funny.
He's Nightcrawler, right? I mean, you can tell he's the one who's going to start staging accidents any day now. He's just one step.
He's right. He pretty much is right there until he realizes that, oh, you know what? He's not doing so well. I may not want my name associated. And that's when he goes back. Good. He goes back to his reporter friend and says, hey, can you pull my name? And then as he's leaving, he says, hey, are you doing anything? And his reporter friend is like, I'm working right now. I can't right now. And he kind of gives him a look and then walks away. Interesting.
Yeah.
And then we have a scene earlier when he and his buddy Iago they've pulled up behind the police lines, and they're like, well, what are we going to do? We can't get through here, the police lines. And then you see them, he's not really paying attention. He looks up and there's a guy up there who's standing in his underwear watching the crowd and everything. So there's a few little things, but it's interesting, odd.
Well, and that was I couldn't tell what they were trying to get at with I want to go back to the pinball thing, because he finishes that conversation with the reporter, and he walks out and he goes into like this little cafe game area, and he stands next to somebody who's playing pinball, and he puts his hand on top of the other guy's hand, who we think ostensibly is a stranger, and starts like helping him push the paddle, like over his hand. And it's a very just sort of gentle, like sort of flirtatious touch that I thought was a really interesting thing to add. What is the purpose of that with his character to give us that little bit? Or is it just a cultural thing that's totally normal? It's okay. You can go help people play pinball that you've never met before.
Or is that like something that Costa-Gavras had heard, like as kind of a way to kind of, meet people?
Yeah.
It's like, I just don't know. But there were interesting little elements in here that kind of, I don't know, just gave more to Vago than just, than Iago, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, or specifically, like if the guy that Vago is portraying, right, in real life is somehow gay, we have to have the narrative connection, right? We have to have the symbolic connection for us to understand, like, oh, that's an anchor to real life. That's a guy I can track point to point in the real story of the death of our politician.
Right. The real person would be Emmanuelidis.
Emmanuelidis?
Yeah. That's
excellent.
Apparently how, yeah.
I will say Marcel Bazoufi did, there's a great fight scene on the back of the Kawasaki, on the back of the Kamikaze. And the Kamikaze we said it's a 3-wheel delivery truck, right? 2 wheels on the back, open bed, small cabin with 1 wheel under the front. Very sort of common European delivery truck.
Makes me feel like they were called kamikazes because it just seems unsafe when you're driving it fast on a 3-wheeler like that.
Wildly unsafe, yeah. So at the end of the scene, it's Iago and Vago in the truck, and they zip past. They knock what's his name on the head, and or Z. They knock Z on the head. He falls down in the street, and they disappear. And another gentleman starts running, catches up with the kamikaze on foot, jumps in the bed, and there ensues a very realistic scuffle in the back of this truck that just feels to me like a very real fight that these guys would get in. And they actually did the fight themselves because they had no budget for stunt performers. So there they were, buzzing down this narrow Algerian street, knocking the hell out of each other in the back of this open bed pickup truck. I thought it was great.
I did too. And it speaks to kind of like the documentary nature that the film kind of has sometimes, which also reminded me of the film The Battle of Algiers, another film that has this sort of documentary approach to the way that it's told. And I felt like a lot of those moments where we were watching these fights, like the fights in the street, I mean, it just, they cast a lot of real people. They had these people where, I mean, the director said, they were really getting into it. And I think it speaks to the Stanford experiment. Like the people who were dressed up like police really got into it with those batons. And we had to keep reminding them, you don't really hit people. You don't really hit people, because they would get so into it. I mean, when you have hundreds of people in like these crazy situations, you can imagine that it just, you're getting excited and getting into it. But it just comes across, I think.
What do you think of the culture of batons and clubs in the 60s? Like, you note, there are no guns in this movie.
Right.
And yet people are being murdered everywhere.
A lot of head hitting.
So many head hitting. It is ridiculously easy to kill somebody with a knock on the head, is what this movie is demonstrating, right? It does not take much.
Well, what's interesting about that is it seems like the doctors should probably have a better immediate understanding when they're looking at somebody clearly hit on the head. It wasn't the curb. It wasn't landing on the ground. Right. Everyone's walking around with a club. Let's think about what could have caused this injury.
Totally. If everybody has like a shoulder holster with a club under their jackets, like it's just they've created a culture of threat around a small wooden club or a baton, and enormous like sort of masculinity that comes with it. There was a very strange sequence where all the police have their rubber batons and the camera is low to the street and it's shooting sort of hip level, and all of these rows of organized police with their rubber batons are holding their batons in front of their waists and sort of wagging them up and down. Andy, is that not the rubber penis parade? I looked like, why are these guys like wagging their batons in front of their hips as they are and marching toward the protesters? Like, that was a very strange choice for me to figure that out. Both, what is he demonstrating there? Like, why is that a move that the police make? And why was it important to have on screen? And I just don't know, but it is, I thought it was really interesting.
I don't think I saw it quite as overt as you. I felt like it was a little more just kind of to the side, but as they're walking, it just kind of shakes around. But it definitely is a thing. And
let me just say this: you will never see it that way again.
Well, you're probably right. Thank you for ruining that for me.
You're welcome.
It is interesting, and I think it speaks to the nature of just the tool, that it's it's designed to be something that is very a masculine power tool, right? I mean, it's something that you have dominance with if you're wielding it. So it makes you the alpha male when you have it. There,
sure does. You just described it. That's like, you just described the tagline to my new film, The Penis Parade. This is why people listen to this show.
Thank you, and good night.
And good night.
Oh, jeez. Speaking to the cast, I think everyone else, I think that they all do really well in their roles. I enjoy them. I did want to just point out Jacques Perrin, who is the reporter. It was interesting because I loved that the media here is both portrayed as honest media trying to get to the bottom of things, like trying to portray the actual truths and everything, but at the same time, totally just a little criminal who's taking pictures of people when they don't want them to be, with the noisiest camera that no one ever seems to hear, I will point out. I'm
so glad you said that. That was ridiculous. Not only is it noisy, he's holding it like up to their faces. When he's photographing Helen in her room, there is no way you don't hear that camera winding in her face.
Exactly. And you can, it's an older camera. You can like see geez, I'm blanking on the camera parts, but you can see what's the
spool,
word?
Right? You can see the actual wind. The auto winder is actually spinning.
The opening and closing of the iris, the aperture. Yeah, kind of opening and closing as he's doing it. So it's like, I don't know. Pretty obvious, but still, anyway, all that aside, I liked that he was portrayed as, he's trying to do the right thing, tell the truth, but also he's just like, he wants to make a buck. He wants these pictures to be in the big paper because it's worth more money. It makes a bigger splash. It gets him more notice. Eventually gets him into a place he never wanted. But still, I found him to be really interested. And Jacques Perrin, who plays him, is one of the producers of the film, which is kind of an interesting note that he ended up getting cast in this because, again, low budget. They're kind of throwing people in. I mean, the DP ends up in a small role. A couple other people end up in these small roles. I can't remember who else. I think it's the editor. He ends up in it as a kind of a voiceover. So, use them when you can, I guess.
Well, and Jacques Perrin, didn't actually note he's in the film. He's a producer in the film, and he's 12 years old.
Right. Well, he's got his little fuzz.
Young. Raoul Coutard is behind the camera. I thought, we've already talked about some of the really interesting visual things that they do with this. And, to his credit, Raoul Coutard working with Françoise Bonneau as the editor, and obviously Costa-Gavras. I think it's a fantastic trio to be able to pull off what they did on screen. Modern filmmaking, indeed.
Definitely a DP who was big in kind of the 60s French cinema. I mean, lots of things, Francois Truffaut, and just a variety of different films that he had done that are very well known. Also with editing like Breathless. I mean, there's a film with the way the camera work is, the way the editing really stands out. So you can see why Costa-Gavras would gravitate to someone like him to film this one.
There is nothing about it as improvisational, or to your word, sort of documentarian as this film looks often. There is nothing about its presentation that feels incidental, like improvisational, accidental, right? It's all incredibly strategic to my eye. Like, it feels so intended. And I think that's a great part of its strength.
Last thing about the kind of the cast and the crew, well, a couple last things, but I think that Costa-Gavras, he had said that he really would have loved to get some Greek actors in this, but none of them, because of the story, he couldn't get people who would do it, because he knew if they starred in this, they would not be able to go back to Greece. They would not be able to work in Greece. They would be pretty much be persona non grata, or be put into a political prison for reasons because of what the film is actually saying. I mean, he was, I said, a Greek filmmaker, but he grew up and lived in France pretty much his entire life. So I don't think that he had to worry as much as some of these Greek actors. So that's why it's populated with all these French actors and everything. But the composer, Mikis Theodorakis, he is a Greek composer who actually was in a political prison at the time of the making of this film. And Costa-Gavras actually sent his wife to talk to him using her maiden name. And he talked to him and he said, you know what, you can use my music. Once kind of explained what they were doing, he said, you can use anything that I have done, you can use. He wasn't in a place where he could actually compose anything, obviously, but he said, if it's something that I have written, you can use it. And so they did. They used a lot of pieces of his music for this film, including one piece, which he actually, Costa-Gavras thought would be really interesting if he played it backward, which he did. And it's, I guess when he actually showed the film finally to Theodorakis, he was just like, what was that one piece of music? And then he was kind of thrilled to find out that it was just a piece playing backwards. So
that's fantastic. I liked the music. I thought there is something, unfortunately, I think to me culturally, that I've seen so many movies where this style of music, kind of the bouzouki sort of style of Mediterranean music, is used for comedic intent, that sometimes you see, these sequences that are otherwise particularly threatening, and just the instrumentation and the scoring makes it sound funny. And that's all me. Like, that's all me. But I can't watch it and think, okay, where's the Pink Panther now? I feel a little bit broken.
You're like the Monty Python sketch. Shut that bloody bouzouki up!
Shut that bloody bouzouki up. That's right. It all comes back to Python. All right.
Really does.
Let's talk about awards. Andy, can you give us a review, the Andy Nelson Memorial Review of watching a lot of movies in order to talk about 10?
I don't like being called, having it be called Memorial. It just really
I know.
Does not speak well.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So Z, this was nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards, which is why it's in this particular series. Also interesting, this was the first of the foreign language films to be nominated also for the Best Foreign Language Film category, which between 1938, our last film, Grand Illusion, and now had been put into place. So here we are. And I guess just giving you a quick rundown of the Oscars that it was nominated for. Best Picture, we already know, A Lost Midnight Cowboy. Best Film Editing, it won. Best Foreign Language Film, it won. And this is that whole thing. It's going to be nominated for both. One is kind of, hey, pat on the back, but we're going to give you Best Foreign Language Film because of that. Best Director lost to John Schlesinger for Midnight Cowboy, and Best Adapted Screenplay lost to Waldo Salt for Midnight Cowboy. So just a quick rundown, though, Pete. The Best Picture nominees: Midnight Cowboy, Anne of the Thousand Days, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, which we've talked about on the show before, Hello, Dolly, and Z. You know, it's a pretty good lineup. I mean, between Midnight Cowboy, Butch Cassidy, and Z, I'd say 3 incredible films. Anne of the Thousand Days, I mean, I really like British kind of royalty period movies. I thought it was an interesting look at Henry VIII and his wife Anne. You know, I wouldn't have picked it for Best Picture. Hello, Dolly, I finally watched that, which I had never seen. And let me just say, it is not one of my favorite musicals. It's great that Wally chose to use clips of it, but I was like, oh, this is just not for me. I didn't dig it at all. And having to listen to Walter Matthau sing was just not a pleasing experience for me.
Was it better or worse than Burt Reynolds singing?
Wow. Now that you asked the question...
I'm just sorry. If you're gonna lay it out there, I also have to lay it out there.
Yeah, you do. You know, I think I would take Burt Reynolds. He's got at least a smoother voice.
All right.
Walter Matthau, yeah. It takes a lady. I don't know. I just couldn't get into that. And, you know, I will say, take Hello, Dolly out and put in They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, which I just watched. Absolutely one of the best films of 1969. I would put that up there with those other 3 films as like one of the best films of the year. Just a stunning film that got a lot of nominations, but didn't win or didn't get a Best Picture nomination. I think that was a record, actually. I think it had like 9 nominations, and one of them was not Best Picture.
Wow.
Anyway, Z... going over to the foreign language films, you know, you look at the foreign language films that it was nominated against, and let's see, they were Adelen 31, which is a Swedish film about a political uprising, My Night at Maud's, which is a French, kind of just a French, and, you know, we should say best foreign language film, each country gets to nominate one film or submit one film for nomination. So Z was submitted by Algeria, not France, and France submitted My Night at Maud's. Yugoslavia, interestingly, submitted a film called The Battle of Neretva, which the government actually funded. It was a very kind of this big battle that Yugoslavia won. And then The Brothers Karamazov, which is from the Soviet Union. Some interesting films here, but absolutely for me, Z was hands down the best of all of them. So I think it absolutely should have won a foreign language film for Best Picture. You know, I would be happy to see Z win, but I'd say Midnight Cowboy, Butch Cassidy, those 3 are incredible options. So I'm okay with it having lost to Midnight Cowboy. But yeah, it's definitely one that should be up there.
You know, for me, I think having seen these 3 that you're talking about in particular, and my deep love of Butch Cassidy, I still believe Butch Cassidy is best of the year. But Midnight Cowboy was an exceptional film. Jon Voight, oh my goodness, it's just great. But and I guess I just didn't have quite the connection. I feel like When the Stars Fall with Z, it's in that second act. It just doesn't hold my attention the way these other 2 movies do. And so I could feel the bling, 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 the sad stars go out.
So it's interesting, though, to look at the 2 films so far at this point that have been nominated for Best Picture that are foreign films. It's interesting that both of them feel very much of the political kind of the rumblings of the time, right? Grand Illusion, very much a timely film looking at kind of, multicultural relations right on the heels of, or not on the heels really, on the cusp of World War II, which I think speaks to kind of the way that film was seen by audiences at the time and likely why it got nominated. Same thing with Z. 1969, there was just so much going on in America. To see a film like this get nominated for Best Picture, I don't know. To me, it makes sense because just the way, and actually, I don't think we said, this film was actually shown. I think the Black Panthers got an early copy of the film, and they were showing it in like secret kind of screenings around the country in their different groups because of it makes perfect sense, right?
Oh, absolutely makes perfect sense. I mean, it's a fantastic, just sort of motivational film for advocacy. I think it's interesting, that comparison between The Grand Illusion and Z, that The Grand Illusion is a movie that takes the hard stuff and mutes it. Right. It sort of brushes off the hard edges. There's no war. It's just the gentlemanly. Here's what happens when gentlemen go to prison. And somehow it was still a great movie, but I think the absence of of the hard stuff makes it, lessens its resonance. And this movie is all hard stuff, right? And it's the complications of reality and the complications that come with presenting the 1969 reality, Greek reality, through story, that I think is that makes this a challenging film to, all the way through. But it's a fascinating pair. I'm super curious now. Do all of the best pictures through like the end of the 80s, 90s end up being about some sort of military or civil war strife? Because there's a lot of fodder in that throughout Europe.
There is, but I mean, the next one after this is The Emigrants, which we've talked about, and that is not about that. That comes just a couple years later. And it is definitely not a political thriller of any kind.
You're right.
No, totally different. And then after that, we have Ingmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers, which also is kind of just a family drama.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Interesting.
Yeah. It will be interesting, though, to kind of look at that once we kind of have gone through all of these and we've all 11 under the belts, to see how often did political strife create cause for a film to be nominated for this particular role. We should probably talk about that giant database of Algerian box office data that you were able to uncover to tell us how it did at the box office. All we know is that Costa-Gavras' film was very low budget. I couldn't find any information for it, unfortunately. So that's it. I mean, that's where we are. I can tell you the movie did premiere in France February 26th, 1969, just a few months before opening at Cannes in May. It did open here in the States December 8th, 1969, opposite the other fantastic film, They Shoot Horses, Don't They? As far as how it did, this was a time when they tracked it's so tricky. They tracked the number of admissions. So what I have for France is that it had nearly 4 million admissions, and that made it the fourth highest grossing film there that particular year. That gives me no information as far as box office, unfortunately. Here in the States, the film did earn $17.3 million or $120.7 million in today's dollars, which, does, with all of that, put it at the top of international films here in the States for some time at least.
Fair enough. Andy, I think we should probably take it to the mat.
Let's do it.
Head over to flickchart.com/thenextreel. You'll see all the movies we've talked about on this very show. If you want some help, because this one's hard to find, because it is a one-letter search, you can swipe over in your show notes and tap the word Flickchart. It'll take you straight to this film where you can add it to your list and see how it stacks up to ours.
First up, we have Z, or The Birdcage. Totally Z for me.
Okay, I'll give you Z.
I should hope so.
Problem is, like, as I ranked it, I'm sitting here like it ended up. I'll spoil it, in the bottom half.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, I'll spoil it. It's definitely in the top half on mine. Z, or Do the Right Thing.
Do the Right Thing.
Z.
Wow. Okay. Let's do it.
All right, here we go. One, two, three.
Paper.
Rock. Ooh, Do the Right Thing takes it. Z, or Night of the Living Dead.
Night of the Living Dead.
Z.
One,
two, three.
Rock.
Scissors.
Ooh.
Oh, look at that. 2 in a row. Z, or In the Mood for Love. Z for me.
Wow. All right, I'll give you Z on this one.
Wow, okay. Z, or Being There.
Being There.
I'll give you Being There.
All right.
Z, or Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. Z for me. Weirdly, I cannot remember Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance or Lady Vengeance. at all. Like those two films I know
God.
we've talked about.
Lady Vengeance was the one that I had some real trouble with. Brilliant movie, and I struggled with it. Sympathy
if it
for
was
Mr.
Old Boy,
Vengeance.
there's a different thing there.
Yeah,
but yes.
no question.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give you Z on this one.
Z or The Prestige? I will say Z.
I'll say The Prestige.
All right, here we go.
All right.
Well, one, two, three. Scissors.
Paper. Okay.
And Z takes it.
It had to come.
Z or About a Boy?
Oh.
I'll say About a Boy.
About a Boy, really? About a Boy is where you break. You are such a softie.
I'm an enigma, aren't I?
You are.
It's such a great movie.
I'm About a Boy.
Okay. Well,
I'm About a Boy
Z,
for the soundtrack alone.
There's a lot of reasons to love About a Boy.
Yeah.
Z lands in spot 191 on our chart. 191 out of 462. That puts it at about a 59%. Pretty low. Pretty low. But for you, pretty high, I suppose.
Well, you know, it ran into a midpoint block on my list that I have just a lot of love for, and probably irrationally so. But that put mine at the bottom of my list. And you know, once you get there, it sets it up for kind of grim pickings. How did it end up doing ultimately on your list? Did it break the top 10?
Well, where did it land on yours? Like how?
I was doing a dramatic, like I was holding back. I was trying to be dramatic about that, and now you're making me say it. It is, it's an 830 on my list out of 1459, which puts it at 43%.
Yeesh. Well, this film I found incredibly fresh, incredibly just powerful. The way that the cinematic language that Costa-Gavras uses, I just was blown away with from start to finish. I think the story works exceptionally well. Everything about it was just, you know, spot on for me. It ranked high first time I watched it. On a re-rank, it went even higher. It's at 69 out of 4,444 films, which puts it at a 98%.
Wow, that's beautiful. Oh, I think that's wonderful. And because you're right. Like the visual expression at this film just alone is exceptional, and that's where I think the Flickchart Letterboxd conundrum exists. Because for me, ultimately, while the second act I struggled with, my overall experience of the film is very, very strong. So while Flickchart tells me that this should be a 2-star film, I think I'm going to land on 4 stars and a heart over at letterboxd.com/nextreel.
4 and a heart. Well, clearly I'm 5 and a heart, which makes it was really no surprise based on my thoughts there. But 5 stars and a heart, so that gives it an overall 4.5 star rating that we will put up on Letterboxd.
All right, so where do we go from here, Andy Nelson?
Well, like I said, we already talked about The Emigrants, and let me just tell you, Pete, I did homework for The Emigrants too, even though we had already talked about it. I'm like, you know, I still should be able to watch all those films that it was up against in the years. This was that funky one where it was nominated one year for Best Foreign Language Film and then the next year for Best Picture, or vice versa. I can't remember. But anyway, I did watch all the films that it was up against as well. And I will say, I just, you know, I feel like I should just do this since I did spend the time. It was up against, let's see, The Garden of the Finzi Continis, Dodes Caden, Tchaikovsky, The Emigrants, and The Policeman. Those are the films nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. The Garden of the Finzi Continis won. I would absolutely put The Emigrants up there. I thought of those films, it was the strongest. The Garden of the Finzi Continis, I'd say, you know, was really good too, but I just really liked The Emigrants. And for when it was nominated for Best Picture, that was 1973. It was up against The Godfather, Cabaret, Deliverance, and Sounder. Oof, hard to pass The Godfather or Cabaret for me. The Immigrants is a strong film in that roundup, though. So anyway, we're skipping that one because, as I said, we have covered it, and we're going a couple years later to 1973. We're going to be looking at Ingmar Bergman's Cries and Whispers.
You know, sometimes I think about Bergman and I think, man, I can't wait to have seen this. Like, just to get it out of the way.
I think that's my general reaction to Bergman. I appreciate the art in his films, but man, can they be tough watches.
If I could do it without actually spending the time.
just have it like injected into me Matrix style.
Just give it to me. Yeah.
Check that one off.
Oh, goodness. All right. Well, this is a good talk, Andy. I'm excited about this series still, and that's good because we've got a lot more to come when the movie ends.
Our conversation begins.
Amazon giveth, Andy.
As Amazon always doeth.
You know they do. When you find the movie, there are some reviews and people who feel strongly about it. Because we went high. I assume you went low.
I did go low. Indeed.
Do you want me to start? Do you want to start? How you feeling?
I'll start.
Okay.
I got because I couldn't go as low as I would have liked because the 1 star is just there weren't a lot, and a lot of people were just complaining about dubbings and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I went with a 2-star posted by Gary back in 2016. Gary posted 2 stars and he named his post 2 stars, and his review is did like. Thank you, Caveman Gary. Ungawa did like.
Well, I actually have some people who can write, and so I did go into the 1 stars, and it was frustrating because some of you're right. I mean, a lot of them are troublesome because people don't have such a challenge with reading movies, and okay. So once you get past that, then we have the propaganda folks, right? The people who see this film as propaganda. And so here's one. M. Dean says that this is not only propaganda, it's pretentious propaganda. I viewed the French language version. This film may or may not follow the history of the event fairly closely, but I do not know the history. Since I do not know the historical details, I will not address its historical accuracy, but I am very skeptical of its objectivity. There appears to be fabricated leftist slant in the film. The characters are all stereotypical leftist propaganda. The left are portrayed as being peace-loving and only driven to violence by the wildly violent conspiratorial right-wing Christian conservative nationalist and organized conspiracy. Any media that renders an implied truth as being black and white causes me to immediately suspect deception on part of the artist. The acting was good, and I enjoyed cinematography, but the film seems to be nothing more than propaganda to push the nonsense of communism, or at least a leftist socialist agenda. It may or may employ out-of-context historical information and undeniably employed biased character portrayals. In spite of its propaganda failings, it was at least entertaining. Very refreshing compared to the cotton candy, sticky, gooey, make-you-want-to-vomit crap films made here in the U.S. today. In all, I rate it low, not because it's a bad film, but because it is propaganda. If it did not attempt to pimp what should have been a long-dead leftist rhetoric, even in that time, I would have enjoyed it more. Okay,
wow.
Right? So, 1, points for cotton candy, sticky, gooey, make-you-want-to-vomit crap films. That is grueling criticism.
But I feel like Roger Ebert coined that first.
Right. But I do think that this kind of review is challenging. And a lot of people commented on this one that, that he acknowledges that he doesn't have an understanding of the history and then sees it as propaganda. This film is opinionated by definition, and it takes about 10 seconds to understand that this was made with a particular perspective. So I guess you can call it propaganda if you want, but knowing that going in, at least I think helps you have a better viewing of it, knowing just a little bit about the history. So I would say don't listen to Mr. Dean. Watch the movie. Read the first paragraph of the Wikipedia page, and you'll enjoy it more, I think. First, you already admit. First, you attack me ad hominem by claiming I'm unaware of Greek history. How is that an attack? You already admitted you don't know the history. It's a rigorous back and forth in the Amazon comment section. Anyway,
I tell you, there's a movie in there, Pete.
I know. Maybe. It's Argo 2, Andy. Thanks, Amazon. It's hard to believe we have been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchase is made through our links. Give us a small commission at no extra cost to you, and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
We covered a lot of great movies that were adapted from other material in Season 10.
Our Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals is where listeners can purchase the source material behind all our adapted film discussions. It helps support the show at no extra cost when you buy through our links.
In our foreign language Best Picture nominees series, we looked at several adaptations, including Z, The Postman Il Postino, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Letters from Iwo Jima.
We hit the high seas with In the Heart of the Sea from Nathaniel Philbrick's nonfiction book for our Aquatic Killers series.
Definitely a weaker entry in that series.
I bet the book is better.
Oh, me too.
Member bonus episodes featured adaptations like Gone Girl, The Russia House, Ivanhoe, The Hot Rock, The Big Heat, and Naked Lunch.
Oliver Stone brought not just original stories, but also adaptations like Conan the Barbarian, Scarface, Year of the Dragon, 8 Million Ways to Die, Talk Radio, and Born on the 4th of July.
Mary Herron's disturbingly insightful American Psycho was adapted from the Bret Easton Ellis book.
You like Huey Lewis in the News?
Oh my God, it even has a watermark.
And of course, more Stephen King with The Mist, The Green Mile, and The Shawshank Redemption for our King a la Darabont series.
Find links to all of these books and more adapted films on our Originals page. That's thenextreel.com/originals. Every purchase supports our show.
Get the full list of books that we've talked about and start your next read today at thenextreel.com/originals.